Day 610 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 297,000 military personnel losses, so that represents an additional 810 in the past 24 hours. So it's a virtual certainty we'd be looking at 300k levels by November, and I'd even venture a guess to say by late October. And do note, I never bring up this blood-bathed calculus to glorify Russian losses, as instead my channel is partly about shedding light on just the sheer barbaric insanity of Russian aggression and Russia's invasion into Ukraine, and how they're hurting themselves irrevocably as a country forever onwards into the future. Then as for Russian hardware losses, so 29 tanks, 18 APVs, and a routinely whopping 30 artillery. And even 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems, which is always a pleasing outcome for the Ukrainian Defense Forces. Then we'll head across to the map today into the Donbass, as a missile strike was reported at Belorechensky, so we need to zoom in for that one. So far into the rears that I'm having difficulty finding it. But there it is, right there. So now this is just 20 odd kilometers, in fact, away from where an ATACMS missile hit last week. And in this instance, we see a pair of detached engines of the MGM-140 ATACMS cluster missile, 2 in total. But something really seems out of order here, or quite fishy, between the photos and the target. But I'll withhold my opinion for now, and we'll await some more verification on the target and the outcome. Then we'll head across a little bit more easterly to Avdiivka. Okay, so we have some satellite imagery that showed a concentration of heavy artillery shelling to the north of Avdiivka, in close proximity to the slag heap, suggesting sustained pressure on the Ukrainian defenders. Now, the duration of the enemy's intent and ability to sustain these high-pressure assaults remains uncertain, despite notable losses in personnel and equipment, obviously, in recent times. But right now, Russia is just throwing everything they've got available to make any advance towards the western side of the railway. And we'll zoom right in so you can see it there, to the town of Stepova. And so ultimately, if the Russians are unable to achieve success, not just with Stepova, but indeed Avdiivka in its entirety, then this operation could become one of their most costly campaigns in all of 2023. Also in this region, as Ukraine wasted no time performing an FPV drone trick shot on the skinny handle of the Russian flag on top of the mining waste slag heap yesterday. Then moving around, I mustn't forget, a little bit more north, so here we go. So Ukrainian forces have made more advances east of the train line near Andrivka, pushing Russian forces from several trench systems. Now, Russian sources are showing a degree of concern over this Ukrainian push, suggesting that it's even bigger than what's reported. But this map, of course, hasn't yet been updated to reflect those changes. Then, somewhere in the east, another immensely destructive Russian TOS-1A thermobaric multiple rocket launcher was destroyed again. And at this point, I'll say it's a worthy mention here that the high number of eliminated Russian TOS-1As can be explained because, well, aside from numerous other shortcomings of the platform, the TOS-1A has an especially low firing range of just 6 kilometers or about 4 miles. Yes, you heard me right, 6 kilometers or 4-ish miles. And so that is a shockingly tight range to work with. Then, not to mention its higher load or reload time, all of which makes it extremely vulnerable against enemy drones, since it needs to be deployed much closer to the front lines. And so this has, as you may remember or notice, has been quite problematic for this Russian platform in recent times, especially when considering that even many low entry level drones can easily cover 6 kilometers, which therefore tends to render this system increasingly useless for its intended purpose on the battlefield. Then briefly, we'll head down south as Ukrainian defense forces had partial success to the west of Verbova. However, not much more is officially confirmed at this point, so we do indeed wait for more updates on that front. Then moving along to a location on the map that we rarely ever go to, although I have mentioned it at least a few times, so the Oblast of Melnitsky. As a day and a half ago, Russian drones struck near to the Melnitsky nuclear power plant. As a result of the strikes, windows in residential and administrative buildings adjacent to the plant were damaged, but also some energy infrastructure as well, putting a number of homes without electricity. As such, the International Atomic Energy Agency lashed out, warning of the dangers to nuclear safety following the Russian strikes near the nuclear power plant. And in response to these events, President Zelensky said, quote, "We are preparing for Russian strikes on energy facilities. We will respond. The enemy knows this well. First they removed their fleet from Crimea. Now they are moving their aviation further from our borders." End quote. And in many ways, he's not wrong. HIMARS and ATACMS now have pushed Russian aviation far, far back to levels that make them less operationally effective. And also, many elements of the Russian Navy have been pulled back to safer waters. So it's not exactly actions that would exemplify an invading military, is it? Then heading across to some news for today, really just a short video today, guys, but starting out with a little bit of hardware news, Ukrainian hardware news. So Ukraine has a new ground drone, or UGV, the Ratel S, also known as the Honey Badger. So the Honey Badger has officially passed all field tests and already been put into serial production. And what can it do? Well, very stealthily carry a remote detonated anti-tank mine at speeds of up to 24 kilometers an hour or 15 miles per hour for a distance of 6 kilometers. Version 1 is just far enough for reaching the TOS-1As, not to mention all of the other heavy armor much closer. And so there's a lot of front line, essentially, for these to work with. So I'm sure they'll find their niche market in terrains that suit them. Then in some other hardware news, Ukrainian specialists have converted the AIM-9M Sidewinder air-to-air guided missile into surface-to-air missiles. And this will help supplement Ukrainian air defense systems' missile stockpiles, particularly in the winter time, where it's believed Russia will ramp up its own missile attacks on Ukrainian power infrastructure. Then moving across to some Russian hardware news. So some Russian BMD-3s were spotted in the field recently, and this is noteworthy because only 137 of them were ever produced in the early 90s. Plus, production discontinued due to a lack of funding, but they were also finding them to be, well, rubbish. So by contrast to the BMP-3s, which they're not to be confused with, they've got a lot less armor and pack a much less powerful cannon on top. So there's no long-term sustainment or replacement plan for these vehicles. They're clearly instead being used to fill the gaps within the Russian army, the already hardware-exhausted Russian army. Then I'll round it all off with a quick funny today, and oh, I do like this one. So, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said that the Russian military obtained systems that allowed it to take down 24 Ukrainian military aircraft in just 5 days, between the dates of October the 19th and October the 24th. And the list is quite whopping, or rather, I should say, it's a real whopper. So here's a quick list of what was claimed by Russia. Of course, once again, no evidence to substantiate these claims, which boggles the mind really, to claim that you've taken out this amount of aircraft with nothing to show for it. No footage, no stills, not even any fakes. Oh, and of note on this list would be the 10 Ukrainian MiG-29s, all taken out by the Russian forces on the 20th of October. But Who are they trying to fool? Honestly, I think themselves, specifically Putin, that they're trying to fool. And frankly, with these claims, I'd have to say I'm not even surprised by this announcement. Grossly inflated claims of losses inflicted on their enemy, timed impeccably to one of the worst disasters for Russian aviation since World War II, with last week's ATACMS strikes destroying 8 helicopters and at least damaging 9 more. As such, Russia couldn't leave themselves embarrassed like this. They just couldn't. So what did they do? They took the completely destroyed ATACMS helicopter figure of 8, multiplied that by 3 or 4, and then stated as fact. Actually, let me count. 4, 14, 16, 22, 25, 30, 31, 30, 32. Okay, so for planes and helicopters combined in this list, it's literally as 32 claimed Ukrainian losses by Russia in the space of 5 days, no less, which is exactly 4 times the amount of the 8 obliterated Russian choppers from last week. That is just childish levels of predictability. All in the attempt that so that they can come out looking like the superior military on Russian state media. And of course, not to let Putin get upset in the process either. But wait, there's more on this story. Don't just take my word for it. In fact, more of a visual. Because notice the little involuntary shake of the head of the guy on the left when Shoigu mentions 24 planes. Then he proceeds to look down for a moment. Pure gold. So that's it for today, guys. Please like and comment. Oh, and I'd like to make a deal with the 60% of you guys that are non-subscribed watchers. And the deal is, if you do subscribe and therefore inevitably help me get to the 100k subscriber mark, I would then have no qualms whatsoever with you unsubscribing after I reach that 100k mark. You would just be doing me a true solid for a short period of time is all. So thanks again, guys, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.